this episode of That Kingsville Podcast, Bob Lynch is back with us again, this time talking Kingsville Military Museum. We're going to talk a little bit about elections, some politics, and some local sports Hall of Fame inductees. All that and more on this episode of That Kingsville Podcast. That Kingsville Podcast proudly brought to you by Kingsville Brewery. Craving a beer that stands out from the crowd? Kingsville Brewery has you covered.
You know, I got a bit of a frog. Hold on. You know what? A brew would really help.
I didn't know where you're going.
A little light A.
It's like a cut.
Could really help a light A. Light A would really help you out.
Our handcrafted beers are brewed to bring bold, refreshing flavors right to your doorstep. From smooth, crisp lagers to full-bodied stouts and hoppy IPAs, every Kingsville beer is crafted with the finest ingredients and a little bit of local love. Perfect for relaxing after a long day or sharing with friends at your next get-together. And the best part, you don't need to leave your house to enjoy it. Just order online at kingsvillebrewery.com and your beers will be delivered straight to your door, free in Windsor, Essex County, so you can enjoy fresh local craft beer wherever you are in Windsor, Essex County. Kingsville Brewery, bringing people together one great beer at a time. Thank you, Kingsville Brewery, for supporting That Kingsville Podcast. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to That Kingsville Podcast. It's Dave, Kevin, and Steve. Again, Bob Lynch here, special guest. Thanks again for coming on the show, Bob.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, we're going to talk a little bit different topic today. We're going to talk Kingsville Military Museum.
Thank you.
Right. Last episode we had you on. We talked about your life and times, being an author, teacher, you know, all your involvement in basketball and sports in the local community. But as we were talking before the episode, the Kingsville Military Museum needs more publicity, needs more exposure because it's such a hidden gem in town. So how did you get involved with the Kingsville Military Museum?
Wow. I'm not entirely sure, but I think I got involved because
I woke up there one morning.
No, it's just that I like to be involved in town. I believe that if you're going to live in a community, you should be involved in that community in some way, you know, shape or form.
Yeah, I think you contribute a lot. Right? You're pretty visible around.
Well, my
town.
wife and I certainly have tried.
Yeah.
You know, we really have. But you're right, absolutely, that the museum is a gem, and it's one of the best kept secrets in Kingsville.
Now, and I say it's secrets because it's not visible from any main street, and I think that that's a major part of the reason why a lot of people don't realize we have it.
It definitely, you're absolutely right. So if you go in, anybody going into the parking lot for the Kingsville Legion, the museum's right there. And we actually ended up with a very large sign so that it's kind of hard to miss if you're in the parking lot.
Right. So.
But you have to leave Division Street to get in the parking lot to see it.
Right. So Division South at branch 188 of the Legion, right immediately behind it.
Exactly.
And you can see it from Lansdowne, but there's nothing really that stands out as an identifiable characteristic, I don't think, is there currently.
And you're right about that, too.
Okay.
Absolutely. But I think it should be.
Yeah, it just sort of looks, well, what's that building?
It takes a lot, though, right? Like it's volunteer-based, and there's a lot of, you know, effort that goes into creating, curating, and maintaining a facility of that size.
It's definitely all volunteer-based. No one gets paid. So
where did all the stuff come from? Because I've been in there and there's so much stuff.
What you saw, we also have upstairs. And storage. That's why we need to expand. It came from local people over the years. The word went out. Charlie Campbell started it. Charlie Campbell was a teacher, whatnot. He was a tail gunner on a Lancaster in World War II. So he thought it would be a good idea to have a military museum.
I've got a quote from him.
Okay.
We do not glorify the acts of war, but remember the consequences and cost of our freedom. Future generations must learn about man's inhumanity to man so they, in turn, will value man's humanity.
And that's the whole concept that we're trying to put forward with the military museum. We're not glorifying anybody. We're trying to prove that people went off and left their lives on a field somewhere. And they were just trying to do what's right. So anyway, that aside, we have a lot of collections and people have dropped them off. When Charlie started it, he said, bring me things. There's a story that he was at a fair with his travel trailer, transport trailer. And some man came up to him and said, listen, I'm going in for a beer, thinking about that. And he said, I've got something for you. And Charlie said, just put it in the trailer. When he came out, he had a 30-foot torpedo in the trailer. And he went, oh dear. So the torpedo is outside now. It's sitting right by the fence. When you walk in, you can see the torpedo that was brought to him. Now, how the man got it there, I don't know.
Yeah, how did he get it in the trailer?
Very carefully.
I would guess. So that's one of the artifacts.
Deactivated, right? Like we don't need to worry in a rainstorm or anything?
No.
Okay, we're good.
Well, there was an incident way back when.
Oh, I remember
they did have to call in the I can't remember. I know the OPP or local police. I can't remember.
The bomb squad had to go, right?
Well, yes. What it was a lady had a mortar shell, using it for a doorstop for years. And so she brought it in as a donation. This is what I think you're talking about, right?
I can't remember the full details.
Okay, so she was using it as a doorstop. So they called the police, and the police went, oh my God. And they wanted everybody to evacuate for like a quarter mile around it or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And they got a hold of Borden, and Borden sent a man down. So it's still sitting where the lady brought it in and put it on a desk, The guy from Borden came down and said, yep. Turned it around. It's live. Carried it out and threw it in his trunk and drove away. So obviously knew, although it was live, it needed a certain amount of triggering.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that the powder in that or whatever it is, after all those years, must have degraded somewhat.
I'm glad the lady didn't have a heavy door.
Yeah.
Yes, I guess.
Or that car didn't get in an accident.
So that's how he got it. It was just everything was brought in. And they also tried to talk a little bit about Kingsville. At the same time, the town was trying to get rid of or move the lighthouse that they had moved from where it was at the top of the Dock Hill to Lakeside Park, upper deck.
Mm-hmm.
So they brought it in and they put it there. And then we had a fish tug brought in. It was basically full of holes, but they parked it there.
Yep.
So that was kind of trying to talk about the early history of the town. We also still have an exhibit of farm machinery and fishing machinery and a little bit about some of the important people in town. But it's not a very big display, but it's there.
Every time I hear the lighthouse, all I can think of is Canada's only traveling lighthouse.
Exactly.
It does get around.
But I know, I'm diverging here, but there's a Moody family lived in that lighthouse. And to go to bed, the two boys, Red and Ron, had to go outside, go up an outside stairway, and go through a very small door to get into their room. Their room was right around where the light was. I can't imagine living there, but anyway.
Did they have to? They didn't operate it, did they?
It was at one time operated atop the Dock Hill, yeah.
Yeah.
And then they moved a range light to the end of the arm when they built the harbor
Okay.
wall. So our collection is huge now, and that's why we're looking to expand. But
in current location, right? So
in current location, all upstairs, nowhere else. And we're really trying to do a better job. And I think that when you mentioned that you can hardly see anything from Lansdowne, one of the unique things about this museum is that it incorporates all services.
Yes.
And talks about all services, even the RCMP, which is national service. So there are other museums in the county, but they only deal with one service or even just a regiment. The Essex Kent has just their regiment. The The Hunter has some naval stuff. There's a little one, airport one at the airport.
Mhm.
And they do a lovely job with what they do. But we're covering all services, including the women in war. They don't. So if you're interested in anything that deals with military, this museum is what you really need. Now, we also have a box of items which you can try on. So, like I was servicing, being the docent for a Saturday morning, and a gentleman brought his grandson in, and they had a ball with putting on an Army jacket and a metal helmet, and Grandpa was taking pictures, and you can do that. Mike Laforet brought. They were looking for a gun that the person could play with for pictures, so he actually carved a replica of a modern gun rifle, and it's absolute. It even has a bolt action that works. It's really an interesting thing.
Wow.
It's all in wood, so it's safe.
Yeah, well, yeah.
It's kind of neat to use.
What of the pieces in the collection, when you go through, you're a amateur historian.
Yes.
When you walk through, what's the one piece that you get excited about?
All right. Jasperson, a town dignitary, was captured at Dieppe, and he was put into a concentration camp. The Red Cross sent him a baseball glove. So he had a 1930s baseball glove in that concentration camp. And as far as I understand, he would sit there and throw it off a wall. Does that bring up any ideas in your head? Steve McQueen in the movie The Great Escape, which wasn't any Americans there, but
doing the same thing.
They had him doing Steve McQueen doing exactly what Jasperson was doing, different camp though. But that's an I talk about that when I do my bit. There's just so much to talk about there. I'm not really a big gun man, but we do have an extensive gun cabinet, all with heavy steel, surround completely. It's a box of heavy steel. You couldn't break into it. So it can be on display as well. And it shows a lot of arms right from pre-1900, 1800 stuff, right up to modern day.
I was going to say what's kind of the year range of the museum? Like, are we talking late 1800s? You're not delving back to 1812 or anything like that.
No. The earliest we go is the Fenian raids and the attack on Canada across Pelee Island, and I'm working on the date of that one. It would be mid 1850s.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we have in the museum. It was in the armories in Windsor. It's cement, weighs 300 pounds. And some fella had it in his garage, and he donated it. So they made a rack for it, metal rack. And it talks about the precursor to the Essex Scottish.
Oh, wow.
So that's what that group is. I wish to heck I could remember it right now, but it's there to be seen. And it's really something special too.
So the expansion plan. So you said you have a collection in the second story. So is it like making the second story open for visitors? Or are you actually adding onto the building like a physical additional space?
They want to add a pretty substantial chunk to the building. They need about $400,000 to do it. They did have a donation, anonymous donation of $100,000. Start up.
Well, that's a great start.
That's a great start. Wonderful. And thank you, whoever you are.
Jumping ahead. there is the social media for the Kingsville Military Museum on Facebook and Instagram. And there's a link to a GoFundMe in the Instagram as well, too. So if you guys want to contribute as well, you know, you don't have to be anonymous necessarily, but
No, you don't.
or their website, kingsvillemilitarymuseum.ca. There's a button there.
Just KHPI.
KHPI.
Yep. At MNSI.net.
Yeah.
It's real easy.
Email.
And that's an e-transfer, which I really don't know very much about because I'm old.
That's okay. We can. So yeah, there you go. KHPI at MNSI.net is the e-transfer email. So if you want to donate that way.
We'd really appreciate it.
100%.
Even a little bit goes a long way.
Yeah. Well, as you said, it's all donation and all volunteer based.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about women's contribution to the war.
Absolutely.
And it's one of those little known ones. Everybody wants to talk about the soldiers, but the women contributed a whole bunch. The farmerettes. There are a lot of young women who were encouraged to become a farmerette. And if you don't know what a farmer is, these are girls who went to farms and worked the farms because the men who had been working the farms were gone. A lot of them were out of cities, and they looked at it as an adventure. They were done in bunkhouses, and they worked hard in dairy. They worked in orchards. They worked in the grain fields. They did everything, and good for them. Not so much here because a lot of our girls stayed home. Our farmer girls in town, they stayed home to work tobacco and whatever they were working. So, but they also did factory work. We had a munitions factory in Windsor, and they were on the line packing shells. It's a dangerous job because if something happened and it exploded, your life was over. And that would be an awful thing to have happen.
Yeah.
But they worked in those factories, and they worked in airplane factories. They made Lancaster bombers they were riveters. They were, the epitome of the working woman. And they did a great job. They were nurses. Now, some of them were at home here working, but by the time an armed forces personnel made it to a Canadian hospital, they were in pretty rough shape by that time. But even in England, they were trying to get them up and back on their feet and back in the battlefield again. So they dealt with a lot of pretty tough cases. But I really have a soft spot in my heart for the women who went and worked on the line. The ambulance drivers, the nurses who worked on soldiers who were very first look at them when they came in after being hit with shrapnel and whatnot, all those little things. So nurses did a great job. And we have some uniforms of some of our nurses from Kingsville who served both in Europe and at home. So we've got their uniforms on display. We call them uniforms, they're outfits. There's a couple of other ones that I really want to mention. Lorna Collicott. Lorna Collicott was a war bride. She served during the war as a sergeant. And she never spoke of her war efforts at all. She married a Windsor gentleman and lived in Windsor for the rest of her life. She was watching TV with her grown daughter, was Pawn Stars. And the guy was trying to pass off an Enigma machine. Mm-hmm. And she said, "That's not an Enigma machine." And her daughter looked at her and said, "What do you know?"
How would you know?
She said, "I know Enigma machine because I worked one." But I did mostly worked Coastal Command. And I broke codes for ships at sea and the Atlantic campaign moving goods into England. I worked out of Edinburgh, and that's what I did because I was a really good mathematician. And a lot of the codes had add, subtract, multiply, divide. This is the letter you have to use. Add, subtract, multiply, divide. This is the next letter you need to use. So her daughter was shocked that she was that important. And her name is on the monument at Benchley Park.
Wow.
So she is a Benchley survivor.
Right. That's Alan Turing.
They were the ones that broke the code.
Yeah.
They broke the Enigma machine.
Wow.
And good for them.
No kidding.
So that was kind of a neat one. And the last one I want to talk about are the transfer pilots. There are women who flew more hours than any man during the war, World War II, and flew more planes than any man. There's a couple little stories. One lady came in with a Spitfire. She did a barrel roll and landed. The commandant came out, started to chew her. She thought it was a guy. When she pulled her hat off and let her ponytail hang down, he stopped and she said, "Listen, where's that hawker that I'm supposed to take out of here? I got to get out of here right now." So she jumped into a different kind of plane and flew it away. Another one, later in the war, they needed the pilots who were ferrying planes. Apparently, they could take off and land, but women could fly it across the ocean. That's kind of strange. They had to fight they could fight all the storms and things and the hard winds and what, but they couldn't land.
Right.
And yet this one lady said, "I've landed more times than they'll even think about landing." But they wouldn't. So anyway, they started letting women take off and land. So she was flying a plane, ferrying a plane to England, and a general got on the plane. I'm not sure if it's Canadian or U.S., but he got on the plane. And he said, "Where's the pilot?" And she said, "I'm the pilot." And he was thinking about getting off the plane because he didn't trust women to fly. Well, she flew through a terrible storm, bouncing around, and landed. And he thanked her. He said, "My goodness, I never believed you could do it." So good for him that he recognized that a woman could actually do something like that. So I have all of those neat stories. One more. During the war in England was a squadron, the 408, Canadian Air Force Squadron Flying Lancasters. They called themselves the Goose. So one of the guys on board got a hold of, he was from Kingsville, he got a hold of Jack Miner. And Jack Miner said, "Okay, I'm willing to take that on as part of our stuff." So they called themselves the Goose Squadron. And they flew many, many missions. After the war, they were stationed out in Alberta, and they shifted from bombers to helicopters. So they flew a Griffin helicopter from their base in Alberta to Kingsville and landed in the yard.
That was a fun day.
Yeah.
Wasn't that something?
Oh, that was awesome.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to have something like that happen and have something like that recognizing a little local museum. And we have that helicopter blade up on the wall that honors all of their fallen for all time. And that's kind of a neat thing to have. And we also have the goose, stuffed goose in a glass cage that came from their mess in Alberta.
Didn't they retire their colors there too?
They retired the colors as well. No. So a whole lot of things that happened. And their plane was called Miss Kingsville, actually, not the Goose. But I'd like to also talk a little bit about the Bad Penny because we had a Windsor connection on that plane. It was a Canadian plane, crewed by all Canadians. And they were part of Operation Manna in Holland. They were the first plane to take in the food. And they were carrying a whole load in the Bombay section. They flew 50 feet above the ground and dropped bags of food out to the people below. Now, the story goes, the guy from Windsor had his window open, and there was a young man standing on the field, a teenager. And the teenager was thinking it could be a bombing run. But the guy in the plane waved to him, so the kid waved back. Take it a number of years later, that young man moved to Ontario. He was developing subdivisions. When he found out, he did research and found the names of the people who were in that plane. So this street was named after one gentleman, and the next street was named after another one. That's kind of spectacular. Then he found out that there was that man that waved to him lived in Windsor. So he wanted to meet him. Mm-hmm. So they ended up in Holland, and they had a great time getting together and talking about Operation Manna. Wow. It was mostly Allied. There were a few American B-17s that flew food in, but for the most part, they were Canadian Lancasters and Australian Lancasters that were flying in.
Yeah, the Great War and World War II, and that's what a lot of people think that military museums are just featuring. But as you've already discussed, there's exhibits and there's information and there's preservation of efforts from other groups like women, First Nations, African Americans, but not just from those war events. There's exhibits from Afghanistan, Korean War, other military operations that you guys are housing and showcasing.
Well, we have a research person, Jackie Bracco, and a couple of other people who work with her. She has done some phenomenal research on people with their attestation papers. If you have a relative and you don't know anything about what they did, where they served, whatever, if you happen to stop in and see Jackie, see our research department, they can find that for you. They can tell you exactly when they signed up, where they signed up, where they fought. If they passed away, they can even tell you where they are. So if you happen to go to one of the beautiful, really are tremendously beautiful cemeteries, from one that has 600, 700, 800 graves to one that has 6 or 7 graves, they're all perfectly manicured. And they have little maps where you can actually find whoever you're looking for. It's really wonderful. So if you know what cemetery they're in, Jackie can find it. Where the grave is, Jackie can find it. So if you happen to be going to Europe and want to chase down a relative, she can give you all the points and what to do. We also support cadets. We have an air cadet group. That's Kingsville Harrow. And they help us out. They're at Remembrance Day. They stand guard at the cenotaph. They help us if the museum has a function. They're there in uniform to help us. And that's really kind of nice to have. So it's good for them. As has been mentioned, we're looking for expansion, but we also looking for volunteers. We need more volunteers. Right now, the executive of 12 people is carrying the load. And not that I mind. It's just that it would be nice to have somebody else taking one spot. I do 6 to 8 bingos a year. I'm amongst other people who are doing bingos too. But it would, if we had a few others, would do one. And most of the bingos we do, you just sit there and talk to your neighbor for 2 hours because the bingo halls in Windsor don't have enough to run all day, all night, all 4 bingo halls. So we're down to just doing, a certain number of hours of actual dabbing paper or whatever. But if we just sit there, like I do bingos with my daughter, we just sit and chat. So we need more people. And what it is, become a member. Costs you $25. Can you believe that much? And volunteer. There's a lot of places you can volunteer for. And Bonnie, our curator, is certainly willing to help you find a place which you can be of service. So I want to talk about that. And we've already mentioned the expansion and whatnot. So if there's any other questions, gentlemen, I'll be glad to answer them. I'm right now running out of one of the ideas that I had put down on paper.
You know, we're the best way I can come up with to summarize what the museum offers. I mean, we've seen I'm assuming the world, apparently, but many of us have seen, documentaries on World War I, World War II, for example, and what we've learned in high school history classes. What the museum does is tell the stories beyond the stories. Mr. Lynch talked about, the little details of the cemeteries and stuff like that, but it's more than that. And, having been in there numerous times over the years, covering events that they've had, or just I was on committee, Dave, I was actually on this board for a while. It's incredible, not just what they have, but how it's displayed. And I've heard many stories over the years of people walking in there for the first time, and they are, I was going to say blown away, but that might not be the right term. No, but they are.
That's a good pun.
Yeah.
They're fascinated. They're wowed. The display cases, the lighting, all of it is incredible. And I think back to, Charlie Campbell started it, but people like Peter O'Shaughnessy and Angus McRae and so many others that put so many hours into it. And it's what they did is created a legacy that's kept going by a small group. It was a small group to start, and it always has been a small group. But what they offer in people hours is incredible. So I obviously invite people to consider this if they're able to donate and able to support, because it is. But before you do that, honestly, take a look. Take one trip, and I guarantee you will be back and back again. There's so much to see. There's so much to offer and learn that even if you spent an afternoon or a morning there, you still won't be able to take everything in. And this is in small town Kingsville.
Bob, globally, the world's in an interesting spot right now, and without getting into politics at all, I'm interested as being a former teacher, hearing from you. My son's 10, and if I take him to the museum, what do you hope he learns walking away?
Well, I would hope that he understands that people have given their lives so we can have a life. Because if we were taken over by a dictator, our choices are limited. And we have freedom here to choose. And that's a huge, big one, There are some very interesting things, just the medals themselves, to go through those and look at them and see what they have. We don't have to see guns, although we do have a few right in the second foyer. But we do have the uniforms, and you can look at them. He could see that the uniforms are too small for a lot of people. When we were doing our 30th, and we had a big dinner, I went to the high school and got 6 students to come and represent people. I said, as long as you stick to the main facts that I'm telling you, that you can, when I handed them a piece of paper, this is Charlie Campbell, and this is what Charlie Campbell did. If you want to enhance it a little bit, go ahead. And I wanted them to just walk up to a group of people at the table, stick out their hand and say, I'm representing Charlie Campbell. And this is what I did in the war. So they were able to talk about how someone left home and went to a place they'd never been before and did things that they never imagined ever having to do. Was a big step. And I'm not sure that's one of the hard things to get across, but just that people have given up part of their life to help somebody else. That's worthwhile.
Well, and they're that next generation, like our kids, are going to be the first generation that won't know someone that fought in the war.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part. And so it makes it all that more important to make sure that they understand that it is possible for there to have been another outcome, and the work and the sacrifice that our families did across the world made sure that didn't happen, and we need to kind of make sure that still doesn't happen.
I was one of the group who took students from high school to Europe. We were going through Beauchamel, which is the Newfoundland cemetery. Newfoundland was not part of Canada during the war. And, kids they weren't being bad. They were just being chatty. And it got quieter and quieter until it was basic silence as they were going through. And one of the boys turned to me and said, "Sir, they're younger than us. They're 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds." And these kids were 17, 18. And then we got talking on the bus, and I said to the girls, "Imagine this. That one battle took away a whole male generation. The young ladies left in Newfoundland had a choice for a mate who was their grandfather's age or their little brother's age. And that was it. So that was a hard one for them to put their head around. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But we talked about that for a little while, and they said, "Oh my God, it must have been awful."
Yeah, having personally been able to travel to Europe and experience some of the remnants of World War II, it is very humbling, very grounding. We don't have as much of that here because the battles weren't fought here, right? All we have are the stories that are told and some of the remnants of what's left over. So having the museum and having the ability to experience some of what's remaining here is so crucial to continuing to understand those sacrifices, things that went on. Mm-hmm. But also, again, talking World War I and II, those aren't the only efforts that Canada's been predominant in. The Korean War.
The Korean War, and even back to the Boer War. We have 4 glass canes. Now, on the property where the museum was the Conklin Lumber Company, but before that was the Kingsville Glass Company. They used a well on the site, a well for natural gas to heat the boilers. The glass that they had to waste at the end of the day to extrude out of the pipes to keep the pipes open. The workers started taking that glass and making twisted canes out of it. We had 16 fellows from Kingsville go to the Boer War in South Africa. And when they returned, they were presented with glass canes. We have 4 of those. Wow. Can you imagine? 4 of the 16 that's 1900.
Yeah.
So yes, and the Korean War, we're also recognizing loss at Afghanistan. Yep. My wife did a board that has pictures of each of the people who passed away at war, females and males. Bill Wilson, a Kingsville young man who was military, he was medic. He talked to a high school class, and they were looking at the pictures, And he said, this young lady was in the Humvee that we were traveling in. We had an IED. I did the best I could for her. I held her in my arms while the helicopter picked us up and took us back to Kabul. She didn't make the trip, and I had to put her in the body bag. That was a pretty sad day.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get that kind of a personal touch, that was pretty neat too.
Yeah, like I said, it's the stories and the remnants that's what we're referencing.
Yeah.
But it's not all bad, right? The Canadian military has done peacekeeping missions and situations. I'm sure there's artifacts and there's stories to be told.
We have Blue Beret, a person who served, brought us his Blue Beret. They were the peacekeepers. Canada was the major peacekeeper for a couple of decades. And other countries who could have been, I won't mention one that's south of us, thought that it was a waste of time. But when you're standing between two groups of people who want to shoot each other and you can't shoot back, and you're saying, please don't, I think it's a bad thing, bad decision. And that's what peacekeepers did. And good for them.
Yeah, it's bravery on a whole different level.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the Kingsville Military Museum, Division Street South, behind the Legion, Branch 188.
We share the parking lot.
They share the parking lot. Open Tuesday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Saturday, 9 a.m. to noon. Closed Sunday, Monday, and all holidays.
And if we get some more volunteers, maybe we can be open more.
You can open longer, right? Exactly.
It's not a hard job being a volunteer when it's open. Somebody will open the door for you and just sit there for 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody comes in, might have a question or two to ask, but you walk through once in a while.
You can do your best. Yeah. And learn and see and experience. The email address again for donations, khpi@mnsi.net. Or again, they've got an Instagram, Kingsville Military Museum. There's a link to the GoFundMe there if you're interested in donating. But as Bob said, get in touch, volunteer. Phone number is 519-733-2803. And if you've not gone to the museum, go on a Saturday morning. If you got nothing to do, experience, see what it is. We've been many times. Every time I go, there's something else that's new. It's been a while since I've been. Really about time to go and check it out again and learn something new. Thanks, Bob, for coming in and sharing that with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciated being here.
Great. Thanks. So that was really nice having Bob Lynch come in and talk about the museum. Like that's some local Canadian Kingsville connection history, right?
And again, it's an incredible place. It's better than bigger museums in a sense of the display, the cleanliness,
and what you see, what you experience.
Yeah.
No.
Well, and as Bob was saying, like there are lessons there for children today when you walk them through, right? And important lessons. And I think it's kind of on us to make sure that information makes it to the next generation. And that's a great way to make sure it happens.
Absolutely.
We got more Kingsville, sports, celebrity / celebration.
Yeah, kudos to my mom actually for giving me the heads up on this one. But,
I was gonna say it was like your mom.
News tipper.
Yeah, no, well, hey, credit where credit's due. I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, guess what, guys? Richard Scott is going into the Canadian Golf Hall of Fame. I'm going to break this story. No.
Okay.
Yeah, the Canadian Golf Hall of Fame has announced that accomplished amateur golfer Richard Scott, along with former professional golfer Jerry Anderson and renowned course architect Charles Blair MacDonald, have been selected for the 2025 induction into the Canadian Golf Hall of Fame. So we know, obviously, Richard won the Canadian Men's Amateur Championship 3 times during his career, first in 2003 and then back-to-back in 2005 and 2006. A graduate of Golf Canada's national team program, Scott is tied with Brent Franklin with 3 Canadian men's amateur titles, trailing only 2 others with 4, a gentleman with 6, and another guy with 8. That's pretty impressive.
I didn't know Tiger Woods was Canadian.
There's a quote here. Actually, it is from Richard. It is a tremendous honor to be inducted into the Canadian Golf Hall of Fame. Being included with the best of the best that Canadian golf has to offer is truly remarkable. I couldn't have accomplished this without the love and support of my parents, Rick and Colleen, Scott. I look forward to being part of the ceremony in August.
Do we know, is he still live locally?
He hasn't lived locally for years, as far as I'm aware. He was on tour in the U.S. He was living down in Georgia, I know, of a few years ago. I was able to have a couple interviews with him, and he was always humble and gracious. And I can say that truthfully. Despite all his success, he was one that, you know, if I reached out, he would get back to me or he would make time. He recognizes his roots, you know, and I know he's probably still got a lot of ties here beyond his parents, some of the guys he grew up with and played with. I know he was part of a very successful team at the high school. I know I'm assuming it's still up. I haven't been in the clubhouse at Kingsville Golf and Country Club for a while, but I know he was up there with
it's up there.
Quite an impressive group of young golfers. So
between, you know, his career, I think when Mike Weir won the Masters, being Canadian, right, bringing relevancy to Canada in our generation for golf, like, that's how he started paying attention to his career, because he was the local connection.
Yeah.
Like, it was great to have, you know, somebody climbing the ranks and doing well and shedding light on, you know, even though he wasn't wearing the Kingsville flag by, you know, I'm Kingsville proud, but it still was a local guy.
Yeah, and he always gave credit to Kingsville Golf. I mean, that course, as we know, I mean, I think we've all played it at least once or attempted to play it
many times.
Yeah.
It's challenging, but it sets, you know, it sets young golfers up for success, because it is challenging, because it has hills in Essex County.
Mm-hmm.
It has dog legs, it has water hazards, and basically everything you can expect in a challenging golf course.
Well, and they have a great youth program too,
yes,
to help foster a lot of that. And they're smart because it gets you members, eventually. But also, it's that youth program allows them to go on to do high school golf, to be able to do college, university golf.
Yep.
I remember I was there the day that he played John Daly, and I forget who was there was a girl as well, right?
Was it Alyssa Getty taking part? Yes. Another fantastic.
It was the two
golfer.
of them. It was the two of them, and then John Daly, because John Daly was promoting. He had like a new line of pants, I think, and somehow because they sold them in the pro shop, they're able to get him to come down and do this event. So the media's all there, and we're following him around. And I'll tell you, Richard and Alyssa, didn't look out of place.
No.
And you could tell at the beginning, like Daly was taking it easy. But then the par 3 with the dip, like he hit that like off the tee, no problem. But then once he got on into the back of that course, you could tell he had to start trying a little bit and was pulling out some of the bigger clubs in his bag. Like watching them basically going shot for shot with this pro was pretty wild to see.
Well, that course has held national championships, right? The Canadian Women's Open or events, not championships necessarily, but open events.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So, you know, and it's in our backyard, and we've got it here. They've done so much improvements over the last few years, cleared out a lot of the trees so that, you know, it dries out quickly, but it's making it more challenging because you haven't played that course before. You've played it with all the trees and the densification, whatnot. You know, Doug Quick and the rest of the team out at Kingsville Golf, it's a fantastic place, and it's great to see it's recognized. So,
yeah, congratulations to Richard, the Scott family.
Yeah. So
as we're recording, tomorrow's election day,
provincial election day. So when the episode comes out, we'll have a premiere.
It may potentially be the same, potentially not.
Maybe a new one. Might not be. We may have new local representation.
Potentially.
We might not.
We might not.
We might not.
We don't know.
Polls are looking pretty heavily conservative majority, but polls have been wrong, so who knows?
Polls have been hit. Sorry, it's a silly aside. Ooh, nice.
But yeah, so if it'll be interesting to see if Doug Ford ends up, well, really any of them, once we have a new premier, what those first steps are to start combating what could be tariffs in place as soon as they are sworn in.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of upheaval, obviously provincially, and then we'll have a new Liberal leader, a new prime minister, announced in the next week, and then very quickly, word is we'll be going to the polls again. Some of the, whether it's Freeland or Carney, some of the rumors I've heard is election will be announced the second week of March, which would make voting day the second week of April, which would be fast.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's so fast.
Yeah.
Like when we talked about this at the beginning of this 5th season of That Kingsville Podcast. 5th. He did the work. It's the 5th.
What?
Yeah, Gary doesn't know. He's
4 or
pleading
5.
Whatever.
4 or 5.
But we, like you...
No, you're pleading for the 5th.
I'm pleading for the 5th. Yeah, we I didn't think there would be a provincial election. I was proven wrong very quickly, but I did think there was going to be a Fed. You guys didn't think there was going to be a Fed.
I thought it was going to be later, but obviously Trump changed everything.
And I think that's the thing that we did not understand about what would take a very quick turn of events after January 20th. So,
and regardless of outcomes, it really is good that we're getting it out of the way now, because and obviously on the federal level, depending on how it comes, if it's a minority or not, we could have some stability for a while, which would be nice, having to deal with some of the geopolitical issues that are going to be coming up, because it's always easier to deal with people and there's going to have to be a lot of behind the scenes horse trading happening between countries to be able to get some of these supply chain deals done, get some of the tariff lifting or tariff imposing across the world, get quick free trade agreements in place for specific industries. And it's easier to get that done if you know that there's going to be someone in place that you can have those negotiations with over the long term. Not to say that a minority government is bad, but yeah. There it is. We are positioned. Canada is positioning itself from a good point geopolitically now, having these elections, even though they're kind of a pain in the butt.
At least there's a municipal one till next year.
Yeah.
So we'll get a little breather.
Yeah. There's, again, no one could have predicted such a rapid series of events until
scary time,
January 20th. But
yeah.
Well, again, want to thank Bob Lynch for coming in and talking the Kingsville Military Museum. Again, go to their Instagram page at Kingsville Military Museum. Click the link if you want to donate or go volunteer, right? Get out, help support a local organization, visit it, experience it, take people, tell people about it. As Bob said, a lot of people don't know. A lot of local people don't know what's there.
Try on a coat, try on a helmet.
Yes, experience some of the stories. So always like and subscribe. I know, again, I'm begging, I'm pleading, but our reach is growing. So thank you, everyone who does. Yeah. Thanks, Gary. Join us next time on That Kingsville Podcast.